the President of the United States has tweeted in the last couple of minutes. He said the deep state and the left and their vehicle, the fake news media, are going crazy and they don't know what to do. The economy is booming like never before. Jobs are at historic highs. Soon, 2 Supreme Court justices and maybe declassification to find additional corruption. Wow. Of course, he's talking about the Trump traitor that has revealed himself, although not his identity, in the pages of the New York Times.
But is that the feeling inside the administration?
Let's bring in Newt Gingrich, Fox News contributor, former Speaker of the House, 2012 GOP presidential candidate, and author of Trump's America. Good morning to you, Mr. Speaker. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. You know, that may have been one of President Trump's best tweets, because it starts to put not just the Trump traitor, as you put it, in the New York Times, but also the Woodward fiction book, all in the right framework, which is over here, North Korea announced yesterday that they wanted to get to a nuclear-free Korea, which should have been a big deal. Kavanaugh is steadily moving towards becoming the next Supreme Court justice, which ought to be a big deal. The economy is booming. These are all real things. Over here is the liberal media running in circles, totally crazed, and I think that the gap here, I think the president had exactly right. And I think historians will look back and think that the left just, much like what happened in the Senate, the left just kind of went crazy this year.
But the thing is, Newt, it's not really the liberal media, unless the New York Times is totally going to get out of the news business entirely. It was somebody from the inside that checked out as somebody on the inside. They got it on Monday. They published it on Wednesday afternoon. So it's real. You walk in there when we don't.
What?
You talk to the president when the curtain's down. Do you sense that people that work for him feel this way?
Look, first of all, there are several thousand political appointees. So who knows? Every president, if you go as a historian, I can just tell you, you can go to president after president. Is there somebody in the White House who's unhappy, or somebody who is such a remarkable genius that they're offended because Trump, you know, doesn't use the right language? I mean, who knows? My point would be deeper. This stuff is all junk. Well, because the fact is, the White House is functioning. The fact is, we're about to get our second Supreme Court justice. The fact is, the economy is growing. I mean, if Trump is so incompetent, how's all this stuff happening?
Because of this person who wrote the op-ed, according to him or her.
Well, you know what, Newt? In the op-ed, the guy admits that great things are getting done, to your point. But at the same time, he goes,
right.
I just don't like him. I don't like the way he takes a meeting. I don't like this. I don't like that. Well, what would Newt Gingrich's advice to this particular person do?
Look, first of all, he's behaving, I think, in a way which undermines and betrays the Constitution. He's working for the President of the United States. The President of the United States is picked by the American people. Here's this person, this coward, that's what it is a coward, who is hiding, writing anonymously, hasn't got the guts to come out in public, and frankly what he ought to do is resign. And anybody who thinks that Trump is as bad as this guy thinks he is ought to just resign and go home. It's all right. Go teach at a college, they'll love you. Go work at CNN, they'll adore you. But this idea that we're going to have people floating around the federal government, paid by the taxpayer, working to undermine the President of the United States, I think that is a very outrageous arrogation of authority, and frankly, absolutely undermines the Constitution.
There's 3 people in the Woodward book that have used their names. It looks like Gary Cohn, it looks like Reince Priebus, and it looks like Rob Porter. What do you make of that?
I don't actually understand the question. I mean, Cohen clearly publicly disagreed with the president about trade policy. That's not a secret. And he did the honorable thing. He left. He wasn't happy. Porter was pretty happy until, sadly, some things came out about his private life. And I think there was a real sense of sadness at the White House. In the case of Reince, look, I think Reince was absolutely central to Trump winning because the organization Reince built for four years worked. That was the turnout. And Reince was from Wisconsin. Carrying Wisconsin was vital. On the other hand, there's no question that the president and Reince in the White House world didn't work as well as they could have. But I can tell you, because I just talked to Priebus a couple of days ago, Priebus absolutely wants this president to succeed and absolutely believes that every loyal Republican has an obligation, both in 18 and in 20, to help keep this movement going forward. I would say that doesn't mean he doesn't recognize the president has weaknesses, but give me a break.
All right.
I mean, every president has weaknesses. The fact is Trump has been remarkably effective for a guy who was never in public office, never dealt with these kind of things. His learning curve is pretty phenomenal.
But he needs a guy like you around him who understands him and also understands the government. You got to go into the White House, Newt.
No, look, I keep trying to tell you guys, actually, overall, he's doing fine. Now, if I was them, and I would have to say, John Kelly is a remarkable patriot and has done a great job of stabilizing things. But the team as a whole, I look at the quality of people like Brooke Rollins, for example, who's come in from the Texas Foundation. She is a first-class talent. And I can just tell you that there are a lot of very smart people working to make this administration successful. And the president, I think, is getting to be more effective over time. And I think he framed it correctly today. I'd like to see him spend more of his time defining the big things he's doing and less of his time getting sucked into Washington baloney.
Which is why he did. I agree with you. That tweet was excellent. A good reminder of the good things he's doing for our country. Thanks so much, Mr. Speaker.
Right.
All right.
While President Trump has been denouncing Bob Woodward, he offered a more positive assessment last month in a call taped by the veteran journalist with the president's permission and released by the Washington Post.
Who did you ask about speaking to me?
Well, about 6 people.
Well, they don't tell me. Nobody told me about it, and I would have loved to have spoken to you. You know I'm very open to you. I think you've always been fair. So we're going to have a very inaccurate book, and that's too bad.
No,
but I don't blame you entirely.
Be accurate.
All right.
Molly, do you believe President Trump didn't know that Bob Woodward had put in all these requests?
I don't mean to disrespect the president, but I wouldn't say he's always telling the truth in these types of phone calls.
Okay. Now, it's not like we haven't read stories like this before. I mean, John Kelly was once denied calling him an idiot, and Rex Tillerson once denied calling him a moron. There's a lot of stuff in my book, Media Madness, about the staff trying to restrain him or slow walk things or end run him. Some of this happens in every administration. What the mainstream media love about this book, I want your take, is that they can say, aha, all the bad stuff we've been telling you about President Trump, see, it's true. His own people say it. Same thing with the anonymous column.
Well, I mean, it is a story that we've heard frequently before, but I've talked to some of these people who have fights with the president, and they characterize it very differently. So they'll say they do have battles, they do fight, and at the end of the day, the president gets to say which way the direction is going to be, and then they have to follow it. I think how you interpret these comments from people says a lot about what type of journalism you're doing. If you see it as some sort of nefarious proof that Donald Trump is unfit for the presidency, or whether you see it as adults who have debates and then they make a decision and move on.
Well, Woodward's former partner, Carl Bernstein, says on CNN, this is Trump presidency is a national emergency. So, Philippe, as a former government bureaucrat, I mean, even in a more traditional administration than Donald Trump's, don't White House aides who are split into factions try to end run or slow walk policies they don't like, or sometimes leak against each other or even against the boss?
But that's a challenge that reporters have to face every single day, whether it's an author, whether it's New York Times, whether it's Fox News.
What's the challenge? The
challenge is whether you're talking to someone who says something negative about a third person because they have an axe to grind or because they want to self-aggrandize themselves. Every reporter has to balance
how much they take that into account, or do you think they basically just love the infighting?
No, I think
happy to do it all on a
books are very different animals, and I've had to fend off a fair amount of them. But on the one hand, when a book is done right, which you've written, when you spend a lot of time on a topic, you're actually more likely to be more accurate because you're not doing the 24/7, rigmarole.
And people are more likely to confide in you, particularly on a background basis, because they know that you're taking the time for very in-depth
We have to entertain the possibility that Bob Woodward is right in what he's describing.
All right, so you raised that possibility. But here's something in the Woodward book that's gotten far less attention. I'm queuing this up for you, Sarah. So according to the Woodward book, the chief of staff said this in a meeting. I'm the only thing protecting the president from the press. The press is out to get him. They want to destroy him. And I'm determined to stand in the way, taking the bullets and taking the arrows, spoken as a true general. Gee, that didn't really get much coverage.
No, but it should have gotten a lot of coverage. I mean, anytime you have someone that close to the president who's saying that he has to be the wall between the president and the media, I mean, we know that's the role of aides, but this is a fiery thing for him to be saying. And it's something that we've heard in the past from all of his other people, but John Kelly's a pretty reserved guy. He's not the type of person that comes out against the press often, so you know he has to mean it if he's going to say it.
whether some of these aides, not at the level of the anonymous column, who are trying to, let's just say, restrain the president, whether they're doing the right thing or the wrong thing, I think it's fair to say at this point that President Trump may be in a position where he has to wonder who he can trust because of all these leaks that have been going on since the day he was sworn in.
And that is something he's talked about a lot, about the lack of people on his team within the administration. That's why I think this was actually a silly move by the anonymous author and the media. They thought this was a way to present Trump as, yet again, the narrative that you've heard over and over again about being unstable. What it really did was confirm just how much of D.C. is a swamp, how much people here oppose what the people chose in the last election, and how unable they are to deal with the reality of what the American people chose.
But according to Woodward, the people who are trying to restrain include the chief of staff, include the defense secretary, so it's not just trolls within the administration. So is it a good thing that we have that, even though the contents are in dispute?
I think it's a good thing. I think it's going to depend on who it is.
No, but I'm talking about the Woodward book now.
The Woodward book is good. We might not know who these sources are, though we might end up, oftentimes with Woodward, you do learn who they are. But, if Donald Trump woke up last Wednesday morning feeling comfortable with the people around him, that doesn't make a lot of sense. His lawyer was taping conversations with him. His closest aides are turning on him legally. I don't think that an op-ed is the tipping point.
And not to mention Omarosa.
And not to mention Omarosa.
Yeah, I was just going to say, the one thing to take away from this is that this is not a totally new story. What Bob Woodward is writing is we've been hearing this from people within the Trump administration and from people outside of it. So even if there are facts and small parts that are disputed, the overall narrative here, we've heard it.
It's a lot more detailed with some high-level names.
Nobody wants to hear it, but Woodward might have gotten it right.
Look how happy he looks.
No, I mean...
Bryness, Sarah Fisher, and Molly Hemingway, thanks so much for stopping by this Sunday.